The call came on a Tuesday morning, cutting through my usual coffee and emails routine. The moment Rebecca's name flashed across my screen, I knew whatever she had to say wouldn't be pleasant. It never was. I exhaled and answered, keeping my voice even. "Rebecca, I've sold the house," she announced, skipping any pretense of small talk. Her tone dripped with satisfaction. "The papers are signed, and the new owners move in next week. I hope you've learned your lesson about respecting your elders." My grip tightened around my mug. The house she spoke of, the one she believed she had just sold, was my childhood home. The home my father had left me when he passed 2 years ago, or so she thought. "The house?" I echoed, fighting to keep amusement from my voice. "Don't play dumb, Olivia. You know exactly which house, the one you've been squatting in rent-free since your father died. Well, that ends now. I found buyers who actually appreciate the property." I took a slow sip of my coffee, remembering the meeting I'd had with Dad's lawyer, Mr. Harrison, just days after the funeral. A meeting Rebecca knew nothing about. A meeting that had changed everything. "And you're sure everything's legal?" I asked lightly. She scoffed. "Of course it's legal. I was his wife. The house was in his name. And I have rights. Olivia, you may have been his precious daughter, but I was the one left to make the hard decisions. Maybe next time you'll think twice before questioning me about that ridiculous remodel." Ah, there it was, the real reason behind this power play. 3 months ago, I had stopped Rebecca from gutting the house's historic features, the hand-carved banisters, the original hardwood floors, the stained glass windows my father had painstakingly restored. She had wanted to strip it all away, erase every trace of the home he had built with love and care. "I see," I murmured. "Well, I hope you got a good price for it." "Don't worry about the price," she snapped. "Just make sure you're out by Friday. The new owners are eager to begin renovations." I could almost hear the smirk in her voice, picturing me scrambling to pack up and vacate. If only she knew. "Thanks for letting me know," I said, then hung up before she could gloat any further. A slow smile spread across my lips. Rebecca had always underestimated me, just like she had underestimated my father. I picked up my phone again and dialed Mr. Harrison. "Olivia," he greeted warmly, "I was expecting your call." "She did it," I said. "She actually tried to sell the house." There was a pause, then a low chuckle. "Did she now? Well, this should be interesting. Would you like me to set things in motion?" "Yes, please, and make sure the buyers understand exactly what's happening. I don't want innocent people caught in Rebecca's mess." "Understood." After hanging up, I stood and wandered through the house, my house, letting my fingers trail along the familiar woodwork. My father's presence was everywhere, in the walls he had repainted, the floors he had refinished, the window seats where we had spent countless afternoons reading together. Rebecca had never understood this home. To her, it was an asset to be liquidated, a space to be stripped and redesigned to fit her tastes. She had tried to change it while my father was still alive, but he had held firm, and when his health started failing, he had made sure I would never have to fight this battle alone. "Livy," he had told me one evening, his voice tired but resolute, "when the time comes, go to James Harrison, he'll make sure you're protected." And he had. The house had never truly belonged to Rebecca, not legally, not in any way that mattered. My phone buzzed with a new message. "Rebecca, I expect the keys on my desk by Thursday. Don't make this difficult, Olivia." I stared at the screen for a moment before replying. "Don't worry, Rebecca, everything will work out exactly as it should." I imagined her reading the message, smug in her belief that she had won. She had no idea the storm that was coming. "Patience," my father used to say, was a virtue. Sometimes, he'd tell me with a knowing smile, the best response is to wait and let people reveal their true nature. Rebecca had certainly revealed hers. Now, it was time for her to learn about mine. My phone rang again. "Mr. Harrison? The wheels are in motion," he confirmed. "The buyer's lawyer has been notified." And just like that, the game had begun. The buyers were understandably upset with Rebecca, but relieved they had discovered the truth before any money changed hands. "How long until she finds out?" I asked. "I'd say by this afternoon," Mr. Harrison replied, his tone laced with amusement. "Their lawyer is drafting a strongly worded letter as we speak." "Would you like me to be present when she receives it?" I considered it for a moment. "No," I decided. "Let her deal with it alone." She needs to understand exactly what she's done. As you wish, he said. But, Olivia, be prepared for the fallout. People like Rebecca don't take humiliation well. He was right about that. Rebecca had always thrived on control, on the illusion of power. Realizing she had made a fool of herself in front of potential buyers, that she had tried to sell a house she never even owned, would devastate her. And that was exactly the point. The fallout came faster than expected. By 3 o'clock in the afternoon, my phone was vibrating non-stop, missed calls, angry voicemails, and a string of increasingly furious texts from Rebecca. What have you done? The last message was in all caps, her rage practically screaming through the screen. I was in the garden among my father's roses when I heard the unmistakable sound of tires screeching into the driveway. Rebecca's Mercedes came to a halt, and a moment later, she stormed out, waving what I assumed was the lawyer's letter. "You conniving little witch," she shrieked, her carefully composed mask shattering. "You knew about this all along." I remained seated, calm in the face of her fury. "Knew about what, Rebecca? Don't play dumb with me." She shoved the letter toward me, her hands shaking. "The trust, the property transfer, this whole setup. You and James plotted this behind my back." I tilted my head. "No," I corrected her gently. "Dad and Mr. Harrison arranged it. I just followed his instructions." Her face twisted with rage. "Your father would never do this to me. This has to be a mistake." "Actually," I said, standing and brushing dirt from my jeans, "Dad did exactly this, to protect me and the house. He saw through you, Rebecca. He knew exactly what you'd try to do after he was gone." She faltered, her designer heels sinking slightly into the damp soil. "That's impossible," she whispered. "He trusted me. He loved me. Did he?" I asked quietly. "Or did he just let you think he did?" The color drained from her face. The realization was sinking in, my father, the man she thought she had completely deceived, had been one step ahead of her all along. "The house was never solely in his name," I continued, watching the last remnants of her confidence crumble. "He transferred it to a trust years ago, before he even met you. I'm the sole beneficiary. You never had a right to sell it." She clutched the letter tighter, her fingers crumpling the expensive paper. "The buyers, they're threatening legal action," she admitted, her voice hoarse. "Do you have any idea how humiliating this is?" I gave her a slow, measured look. "Almost as humiliating as trying to throw your stepdaughter out of her own home? Or maybe as humiliating as spending years pretending to love someone just to get their money?" She flinched as if I had struck her. "You don't understand anything about my relationship with your father." "I understand more than you think," I said. "Dad told me everything before he died, about the prenup you refused to sign, the unexplained withdrawals from his accounts, the meetings with other men while he was in the hospital." Her eyes widened, her grip on the letter slackening. "He knew?" she whispered. "He knew everything," I said softly. "He just waited, watched, and planned. Like father, like daughter." Rebecca took another step back, her expensive suit now dusted with specks of garden soil. "This isn't over," she spat, but the fire in her voice was gone. "Actually, it is," I said, pulling out my phone. "I've recorded this entire conversation. Would you like me to add it to the file Mr. Harrison is compiling about your attempt to commit fraud?" For the first time since I had known her, Rebecca was speechless. "You have two choices," I continued. Leave the house, leave me alone, and leave my father's memory alone. Or try anything else, and I'll make sure every single one of your secrets sees the light of day. The affairs, the money, everything. You wouldn't dare," she hissed. "It would tarnish your precious father's legacy." I smiled, calm and unshaken. "His legacy can withstand the truth, Rebecca. Can yours?" She stared at me for a long, calculating moment. Then, without another word, she turned and stalked back to her car, her heels sinking into the grass with each furious step. As she drove away, I noticed she had dropped the lawyer's letter in the garden. I picked it up and smoothed out the crumpled paper. The legal jargon was complex, but the meaning was crystal clear. Rebecca had no claim to the house, had never had any claim to it, and her attempt to sell it was nothing short of fraud. My phone buzzed with a text from Mr. Harrison. How did she take it? About as well as we expected, I replied. But I think she's done. Your father would be proud, he wrote back. He always said you were stronger than anyone knew. I looked around the garden, at the roses my father had planted with such care, at the house he had fought so hard to protect. Rebecca had thought she was teaching me a lesson about respect. Instead, she had learned one, about underestimating people. Both the living and the dead. And for the first time in 2 years, the house felt truly mine. I spent my evenings restoring the house, undoing Rebecca's hasty modernization attempts. Room by room, I erased her influence, bringing back the home my father had cherished. It felt like reclaiming something stolen, piece by piece. One evening, while sorting through boxes in Dad's study, I found a letter. My breath caught at the sight of his familiar handwriting on the envelope. It was dated just days before his death. My hands trembled as I opened it. My dearest Livy. If you're reading this, then everything has played out as I expected. Rebecca has likely tried to take the house, and you've learned about the trust arrangements I made with James. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you everything while I was alive. Rebecca was watching too closely. I needed her to believe she had won. You see, I discovered her true nature about a year into our marriage, but by then, she had already shown her hand. The mysterious illness that landed me in the hospital, not so mysterious after all. I had James investigate the dizzy spells, the confusion, the gradual weakening. Rebecca had been adding something to my evening tea, not enough to kill me quickly, but enough to make my decline look natural. I played along, let her think she was succeeding. Meanwhile, I made arrangements to protect you and everything we built together. This house isn't just a building, Livy, it's our legacy, every repair and restoration, a memory we shared. I know it must have hurt watching me seem to choose her over you in those last few months. Please forgive me for that deception. I needed her to feel secure, to believe she was in control, so she wouldn't suspect what was coming. There's more you need to know. Check behind the loose brick in the study fireplace. I left something there for you. Remember, strength isn't always about confrontation. Sometimes, it's about patience, about waiting for the right moment to act. I love you, my darling girl. Dad. Tears blurred the words as I read them again and again. Everything made sense now, his distant behavior, the cryptic remarks, the way he had insisted on having tea alone with Rebecca every evening. He had known. Moving to the fireplace, I ran my fingers along the old brickwork until I found it, the loose one. Heart pounding, I pried it free. Behind it was a small USB drive and another note. Show this to the police when you're ready. Swallowing hard, I plugged the drive into my laptop, the screen filled with videos, hidden camera footage from around the house. Rebecca, carefully stirring something into his tea. Rebecca, meeting with a man in a hotel lounge, whispering urgently. Rebecca, on the phone, discussing her plans for after my father's death. The evidence was damning: fraud, conspiracy, attempted murder. I gripped the edge of the desk, my breath shallow. She hadn't just tried to steal the house, she had tried to steal his life. My hands shaking, I called Mr. Harrison. James, I said when he answered, my voice steadier than I felt. I found Dad's letter, and the drive. There was a pause. Are you ready to take the next step? I hesitated. The drive could destroy Rebecca completely. It wouldn't just strip away her wealth and status, it would put her behind bars. But there was something my father had understood long before I did. People like Rebecca weren't defeated by force, they were defeated by fear. Not yet, I said finally. Let's keep it as insurance for now. Knowing we have it is enough. Mr. Harrison let out a quiet chuckle. Your father said you'd say that. He always said you had his sense of strategy. The next morning, a large envelope arrived from Rebecca's lawyer. Inside was a formal document relinquishing all claims to the house and my father's estate. On top was a brief and signed note. You win, Olivia. I'm leaving the state. Don't worry about hearing from me again. Just keep what you know to yourself. I stared at the paper for a long moment. She had found the cameras. Of course, she had. She would have torn through the house after our confrontation, searching for anything incriminating, and she had found just enough to know she had lost. I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of something lift from my shoulders. Standing in Dad's study, surrounded by the life we had built together. I felt a deep, quiet peace settle in my chest. He had protected me one last time. He had taught me one final lesson, about patience, about waiting for people to reveal their true nature. Rebecca had thought she was teaching me about power, but Dad had taught me something far greater: how to see through deception, how to protect what mattered, and how to win without losing myself in the process. In the garden, Dad's roses bloomed more beautifully than ever. I tended them carefully, honoring his memory in every flower that opened. Sometimes, as I worked among them, I could almost hear his voice. Remember, Livy, the strongest roots grow in silence, hidden from view until the right moment to bloom. He had been right. Of course, strength wasn't always about confrontation. Sometimes, it was about waiting, watching, and knowing when to act. The house stands as it always has, a monument to love, patience, and justice served quietly but completely. And somewhere, I like to think, Dad is smiling, knowing that his final lesson was well learned. As for the USB drive, it remains behind that loose brick, a silent guardian ensuring that some stories stay buried. At least for now. After all, as Dad always said, timing is everything.